welcome back to my channel. This is Sandra and I make videos all about cybersecurity, having a career in technology, as well as work vlogs. So I know there's been so many of you asking me in the comments about different roles in cybersecurity, and honestly there are so many jobs out there that it can be confusing to kind of pick and choose and a little bit overwhelming if you're just starting out in your career. So here is a list of 25 jobs in cybersecurity. Now in the past I did make a video on the top 7 roles in cybersecurity, but that was also very high level, but I also feel like it didn't encompass enough of the range of jobs in cybersecurity, so I can link that video down below if you guys are interested in checking that one out. But for now, let's get started with this video. Okay, so the first role is a pentester or an ethical hacker. Now this is probably one of the most cliche heard of cybersecurity jobs ever, and if you're completely new to cybersecurity, pen testing is basically when you have some kind of website or domain, you're basically trying to hack into it and try to find those vulnerabilities so that the developers or the app team can fix them. This role is actually very popular just because of the fact that a lot of times developers don't really code with security in mind, and as someone who came from a software development background, I can definitely attest to this because that's not really something they teach you in college, and pen testing overall is a really solid career option just because of the fact that they get to work with so many different tools. They're one of the key technical roles in cybersecurity, as well as the fact that not a lot of people can say that they hack into things for a living. So I definitely think it's up there in terms of one of the best jobs in cybersecurity. But of course I am a bit biased. The learning curve for pen testing can be a bit steep, which is probably one of the main cons, just because starting out you're probably doing hack the box, try hack me, maybe if you capture the flag challenges, if you're able to navigate different tools like burp suite, Metasploit, stuff like that. And pen testing does also focus on a lot of certifications like the CEH or the OSCP. Okay, so the next role is digital forensics. This is something that I really enjoyed in college, but basically if you're working in digital forensics, oftentimes you get called on and the incident response team takes on a new case, and then they call the forensics team to kind of gather all the data, all the network logs, all the potential hard drives, disks, etc. that are relevant to the case. And it's basically your job at a very high level to find evidence of whether something did or did not happen. So when I first learned about digital forensics, I was actually doing stuff where I got a hard drive disk and it was imaged, and I basically had to extract files from it. So anything that you think is deleted is not really deleted. But nowadays, digital forensics is really going towards a more network-based approach, just because of the fact that a lot of incidents nowadays don't really have to deal with actual hard drives or actual physical devices, and they really do have to deal with network logs, network infrastructure. If someone got into your company's network, what did they do, what commands did they run, etc. So you're basically going to be going through a lot of data dumps and a lot of logs. It's definitely a great role if you're someone who's really interested at looking at the data and trying to find anomalies and things that went wrong, depending on whatever case that you're looking for. And of course adhering to all the steps in digital forensics that keeps evidence secure, safe, and well documented. Alright, so the next role is cybersecurity intelligence. If you like reading and writing and you're interested in cybersecurity, this is probably the job for you. So cybersecurity intelligence is one of those really cool things where you get to work with different organizations like the FBI, the CIA, of course depending on whatever things that you're researching, and the companies and sectors that you're working for. But basically you're going to be doing research on all things cybersecurity, all things hacking, probably some nation states. You might be an SME in a certain area and focus on looking up intelligence directly related to the Internet of Things devices or different topics like that. So you'll probably start your day by reading a bunch of different articles, different cybersecurity blogs, see if there's anything eye-catching in the news related to your area or something that you might want to bring up to your team. And then after that, you might have some kind of deliverables in the shape of a report. And these will basically be like your mind dumps of everything that you've read and consolidated into one thing to inform other teams in your company or even your sector, if you're a bit broader, of all of the upcoming cybersecurity hacks or different things in the news that people should be aware of. So your job basically informs business decisions by other teams in your company, which is honestly really cool. Okay, so the next role is a cybersecurity analyst. So the most common role you can probably find in cybersecurity as an entry-level person is probably as a cybersecurity analyst. Now this is a very broad role. You could be doing things from installing firewalls to checking encryptions to non-technical things like reporting breaches, researching different IT trends, creating presentations on cybersecurity for your team. Like there's so many technical and non-technical things that you could be doing as a cybersecurity analyst, and I feel like that's kind of like the beauty of this role. In my rotational program, I'm technically kind of like a security analyst, and I've had so many different roles from doing software development to pen testing, so you could basically be doing a mix of everything. And I feel like the key here in this role is to learn as much as possible in your early career and then take what you do enjoy from that role and then try to focus in on whatever you might be interested in. But if you notice that this is actually what you want to do and you like a little bit of everything, then that's definitely okay too, and there are a bunch of different roles like that. But the cybersecurity analyst role is basically there to help you figure that out. The fifth role is a cybersecurity consultant. So a cyber consultant is pretty similar to a cyber analyst, except in the case that as a consultant, for those of you who don't know, usually consultants are some kind of third party, or even if you're in the same company, a consultant usually is someone outside of the team who gives advice or advises the team on all things cybersecurity, what they could be doing better, areas of improvement, and any actual vulnerabilities that they're seeing. So if you want to do cybersecurity analyst stuff, but then you also want to help people and advise people, and you're also very good with managing different projects, you could be advising 2 to 3 different teams depending on what kind of role that you're in and what company that you're in. But just think of it as an advisor for all things cybersecurity for whatever clients or teams that you are working with. Okay, so the next role is as an FBI special agent. So outside of hacking and just being a hacker, FBI agents are probably the people that you often see in cartoons when you're growing up. But obviously you're going to be working for the FBI, and your role could range from anything from doing intelligence to surveying different applications to making sure the infrastructure as well as the perimeter of whatever systems that you're using are secure. But if you actually go and search up FBI special agent jobs, you'll find that they actually want people from various different walks of life, from STEM to law to linguistics to cybersecurity, military, technology, etc. But one thing to note about FBI agents is that to apply, you have to be between 23 and 36 years old. And when I first heard of this, I also thought it was kind of interesting too. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, because they do have a actual age range to actually apply as an FBI agent, but it's also one of the most mission critical jobs in the US. So if you're looking for something high pressure, involved in a lot of different cases, and touching basically every single sector in the United States, this is probably the job for you. Just know that you also have to pass pretty vigorous background checks, as well as different levels of security clearances depending on what you may need. And security clearances can take from a few months to a year to receive, so the process is definitely very strenuous, so definitely just keep that in mind. Okay, so the next role is incident response. Let's say something happened in your company, there's some kind of breach, like discovering a file with confidential information on someone's computer, or maybe someone emailed a document out from your company to their personal email. These events and many more can trigger some kind of incident response process in your company. And usually this involves a team of people who are always on the front lines, on call, on standby, waiting for some incident to happen. They open up some kind of call, they bring on the team, the people that are involved to discuss the problem and try to figure out how severe it is, how much it can impact the company, as well as following the incident response process, which is very important to note. And there's also certifications on this if you're interested in learning more about incident response. But one thing to know about this team is that it's a role where you're likely to be on call for. And on call just means that work can ping you, can call you anytime during your on call period, and you have to be ready to go. So this could be at 4 a.m. in the morning, this could be on a weekend, and it also depends on your team how long these on-call periods are for and how often you get them. So if you're working for a company that's international, you may have less on-call periods just because you may have teams overseas in Asia and Europe that may actually cover those late night hours where you would have originally have been on call for. But it's definitely a demanding job for anyone who is interested and thrives in scenarios that are very high pressure, high pace, and things that are just moving really quickly, and you don't always know exactly what happened. So if you're that kind of let's get to the bottom of this person, then this job might be for you. Okay, so the next role is IT help desk. And I feel like a lot of people discredit this job just because it is a bit more entry level. But a lot of people I know who are actually in pen testing now actually started in IT help desk. This could be for a call center, this could be for anyone just trying to troubleshoot whatever issues that they're having with their device. And if you really think about it, IT help desk is the core of problem solving, trying to help a client or customer figure out exactly what's going on, because honestly, the end user doesn't always know what's going on. So just being able to have the people skills to handle those, the communication skills, as well as just being someone who's very interested in problem solving and trying to figure out what's wrong with this device. We're trying to figure out why this computer isn't connecting to the network is actually a really good skill to have, because you're always pushing, always trying out different resolutions for the issue. If one doesn't work, then you go to the next one. And it definitely does teach you resilience, just because over time, you're gonna already have an idea of what the problem is and everything in between, because honestly, people call IT help desk for many different things. It's definitely an awesome entry-level role for someone who is just starting out. Alright, the next role is red team. So red team is like the holy grail pinnacle of pen testing. And you might be wondering what's the difference between pen testing, ethical hacking, red team. And I would say that red team stands out a cut above the rest just because they're able to hack into many different things that aren't just web applications. So a red team might be hacking into a server, a physical building, an airplane, various different things that aren't just web hosted or web based, and that's what makes red team so unique. Many red teamers do start out with a pen testing background, but a lot of them also have their degrees or educational background in psychology and working with people, because at the end of the day, if you're a red team, you're kind of like the official pro hacker, and one thing that you really care about is trying to figure out what someone is trying to do, whether it's a malicious threat actor who is trying to hack into your company, some nation state or APT, or even a malicious insider who is working at your company that might be trying to exfiltrate some data from the company. You could be involved in phishing campaigns, trying to hack into your company's actual buildings, but all in all, red team is one of the most technical roles in cybersecurity, and for anyone interested, I would definitely recommend first starting out with a few capture the flag challenges, or maybe even doing some bug bounties just to get some real world experience, as well as different certifications similar to pen testing or ethical hacking with the CEH as well as the OSCP. The next role is the blue team, which is kind of like the opposite of the red team, when red team is more offensive and blue team is more defensive. And I've talked to a lot of people about these two roles. Blue team is actually the most difficult because on red team, you have to find at least one way in, and that's all you need. One way in, one way to exfiltrate into the network and elevate your privileges. But on blue team, you have to think of all the ways that their actor could get into your system. And some of these things you might not even be able to control in your company. For example, the firewalls might be configured properly, you might have all the right encryptions, but all it takes is one app team to develop some kind of application that might not be the most secure, and a threat actor could get in that way, be able to get into the network, and then escalate their privileges. So because of this, blue team, the defensive side, can actually be a lot more difficult and tedious because there are just so many things on your perimeter in most companies nowadays, because there are so many applications, third-party vendors, anything on your internal network that connects to the outside world could be a potential threat. So blue team definitely has their work cut out for them, but if you're someone who likes that kind of work, likes making sure that all the holes are plugged, you have all your bases covered, it's definitely an awesome role to be in. The next role is on identity and access management. So let's say a new employee gets onboarded into your company. It's going to be you and your team's job to configure all the actual access requests that goes into that person's account. So this could be going into anything from adding them into the domain, as well as the resources or applications to that person's specific team that they're joining. So most companies have some kind of access management team, just because there are so many applications, the larger a company gets, you can't just give everyone access to everything. That's one of the first things you learn in cybersecurity, which is the case of least privilege, which basically translates to you should only give people the privilege of the things that they need to complete their jobs. For example, if I'm in technology, I shouldn't have access to an application that the accounting team uses, you know? Like, those are different softwares. I'm never gonna have to use that for my job, therefore I should never have access to it in the first place. This creates a smaller attack surface, just because if a malicious threat did get into the network, they can't just get one person's account and have access to every single thing on your network, which is obviously a very big no-no. And access management, the larger a company gets, is harder and harder to maintain, which makes it one of the most important roles in cybersecurity. The next one is a database administrator. I know this one isn't technically specifically focused on cybersecurity, but I do think it's an important role, and it is kind of cybersecurity related-ish. So if you like working with databases, if you like SQL, if you like just in general working with data, this may be a good role for you in cybersecurity. So the database administrator is exactly what it sounds like. They are in charge of the database, maintaining all accesses to the database, as well as the users are actually allowed to configure things, export data, make queries, etc. And DBAs are also the ones who kind of track all of the activity that goes on within a database. One DBA might be in charge of multiple databases for multiple different applications, but usually there are a lot of softwares out there that can help identify red flags for DBAs to look at. For example, if there's some kind of automated job account that normally only reads data from the database, but then all of a sudden you're seeing a log that says that it exported 2,000 records of data from the database. Well, first of all, you probably want to know why a read-only account has write access to the database, but besides that, you're probably going to reach out to the team in charge of that account, see if they have a reason for this or if they know why it happened, and potentially reach out to the incident response team if something malicious actually did occur. So anytime you're the admin of anything, the stakes are always very high, especially because you're in charge of this. So you definitely want to make sure that you're checking all the logs, you're checking to see if anyone's pulling data unnecessarily. So as a DBA, you're kind of like a gatekeeper. Okay, so the next role is the site reliability engineer. This role is definitely becoming a bit more popular. I used to see this more for big tech companies just because they are never ever down, but it's definitely becoming a more popular role as more and more companies come online and have to stay online 24/7. So if you guys are familiar with the CIA triad, which is kind of like the pinnacle of cybersecurity and are basically the pillars of confidentiality, integrity, as well as availability. Now, you might not always think that availability is something that relates to cybersecurity, but just think of a DDoS attack where someone is just bombarding your site with requests to the point where real users cannot actually go on there and do do anything. So because of this, companies want to invest time and money into things that keep their systems up running most of the time. There's honestly never 100% on time, just because of the way cybersecurity and the internet and technology works, as of right now at least. But there are definitely those 99.99999% always on. But those nines at the end cost millions and millions of dollars. So site reliability is very, very important, just to make sure that if your main infrastructure goes down, is there a backup? And is there a backup for the backup? Maybe even a backup for the backup of the backup? And on the Security Plus, you also learn about hot sites, cold sites, warm sites, just different backup sites to make sure that your company and your services and your products can fail gracefully and securely. And that is your main job as a site reliability engineer. And you'll probably need a pretty good background in infrastructure, networking, as well as troubleshooting and maintaining different hardware. Alright friends, I actually ended up splitting this video into two parts because it got a little bit long. So here I am back in the afternoon, as you can see by the lighting difference. But the next role is a security architect or a network infrastructure role. Now I know these roles have two distinctly different titles, but oftentimes they can be doing similar things depending on the company and whatever sector that you're actually working in. But obviously most companies aren't going to be getting new infrastructure or network architecture every single year. I mean, I'm sure there are additions to your infrastructure, but for the most part, you're not replacing everything every single year. So for the most part, your role is probably going to be maintaining that infrastructure, whether that's reviewing your current system security procedures, researching and implementing different improvements for those security processes, running system tests on a regular basis just to make sure everything's running smoothly, as well as working on different disaster recovery plans and procedures. So I know these are really broad responsibilities, but I do think any role that has to do with infrastructure, networking, etc., you really have to know a lot about the hardware and all the components in your network. If there are any issues that are reported by users on a day-to-day basis, you're the person who will probably be looking into all the technicalities of these things. So if you're interested in networking, hardware, software, as well as just the more technical side of cybersecurity, this is definitely the job for you. So the next role is a malware analyst. This one actually sounds really, really interesting to me just because of the nature of the role. So basically, it's going to be your job to examine, identify, and try to understand different cybersecurity threats like viruses, worms, trojans, rootkits, bots, etc. You can definitely find more information on the most basic cybersecurity threats out there by doing a quick Google search. But basically, malware is basically malicious code that tries to get the user's system or the target system to do something that the malicious threat actor wants. This could be exfiltrating data, deleting files, encrypting files, trying to escalate privileges, a backdoor. So there's just a bunch of different things that malicious code can do, and all these little things are just called malware. And for many of the malware analyst roles I was looking at, there seemed to be a research component of it as well as a hands-on component. So basically for the research part of it, you're probably going to be reading news, different articles. Crimes on Security is one that I really enjoy, just about different hacks, different malware attacks, just for you to do your due diligence on and know about. And the actual hands-on part, where if there is an incident where there's some kind of malware injected, check what exactly the payload is doing, what it did, if there's any data exfiltrated, what the effects of that malware were. So it definitely does seem like a really interesting role, just looking at malware and doing research, and you'll probably learn a lot about different payloads. And it could also be a really good way into pen testing or ethical hacking if that's something you're interested in, just because your background knowledge on all these different malicious payloads are going to be so useful if you're actually doing penetration tests or red teaming or blue teaming if you actually want to go more of the defensive side. But it's definitely one of the most interesting roles that I've seen so far. Okay, so the next job is actually a really popular one that many of you have asked me to make videos on. So I will be making a video just talking about this in general, but it is a SOC analyst or a Security Operations Center analyst. So as an SOC analyst, you're basically going to be working to monitor your company's infrastructure, their perimeter, anything that is going on in the company, you are monitoring. Because most companies have very vast IT infrastructures, assets, applications, servers, etc. All of these logs are going somewhere. All of this data is being generated, and someone is going to view these reports. So basically it is your job to assess any security measures, security processes, as well as looking for different weaknesses or areas of improvement. So as part of an SOC, you're basically going to be using different technologies and applications that help you monitor network logs, endpoints, network traffic, any security events that are generated. And all of this data is basically used to identify any vulnerabilities in your infrastructure, which then goes into preventing breaches for your company. Anytime some kind of suspicious activity or an anomaly is recorded, then it's basically your job to kind of spring into action. And depending on the company, you may actually also be the incident response team, or you might pass it to an incident response team that is actually its own entity inside your company. So basically you're at the front lines of all things cybersecurity in your company. I really do think it's a great area to grow in, especially because you learn so much, you communicate with so many different teams, and you also get to see everything basically that is going on the network. So it's definitely a great role for learning as much as you can in your early career career, especially if you're coming out of college or trying to switch into cybersecurity. Okay, so the next role is an endpoint security engineer. So you can kind of think of this role as similar to the one I mentioned about network security engineers, but instead of an entire network, you're focusing specifically on endpoints, which are basically laptops, phones, servers, desktops, anything that basically an end user is using to access company assets or applications or tools they use to do their jobs. You would be in charge of the implementation, administration, and support of company-wide endpoint security tools. So there's many of them out there, and this also includes things like malware detection. So basically anything that you may have on your personal computer, basically an antivirus software, maybe some kind of firewall, a VPN. Basically all of this would be managed by the endpoint security team and then distributed to all the endpoints in your network. This is really important because if you have 1,000 people working for your company, if there was an update to your antivirus software, you're not going to go to 1,000 people and update all their softwares in person or at once. That's something that people used to do actually in the olden days before all of this was digitalized. But nowadays, as someone who's part of an endpoint security team, you're basically going to be working with the tools, making sure the configuration is okay, and then roll them out to the endpoint. And that basically comes as some kind of software or firmware update for the end user. So at the end of the day, your ability to analyze and make sure that all the security tools that you're using for your endpoints are working correctly, reporting the correct data, not incorrectly restricting any user access, those are all going to be core parts of your job. And it's also great because you'll probably have the chance to work with a lot of different teams across the company, just working on figuring out gaps in coverage. Okay, so the next job is a compliance analyst. If you're more on the process and governance side of things, you'll definitely like this role because it's basically your job to make sure that the teams in your company, whether it's operations, procedures, or processes, are meeting any relevant government and industry compliance standards. So because the world is always changing, of course government regulations and standards are also always changing. So it's your job to be doing research on these regulations and policies, as well as trying to understand them to make sure you know how to implement those from just a policy into your company's actual processes. Ensuring that everything is done correctly across your organization is obviously a really big task, but oftentimes you may also have to be applying for the actual compliance certification for your organization from the government or whatever organization is actually producing those standards and policies. So this would be a more non-technical role, but of course it is very wordy, and if you're someone who is in legal or very good with documentation and technical writing, this may be something that might be interesting to you if you're coming into cybersecurity from a non-technical background. Alright, so the next role is a cybersecurity engineer or an application security engineer. Now a role like this obviously does mean that you probably will need coding skills, but for the most part it may not be the full stack application kind of coding skills that you might be thinking of. So as a cybersecurity engineer, it may be your job to identify different vulnerabilities or threats in your systems or applications, and then using your skills in coding, implementation, and etc. to create solutions to defend against actual hackers. So this could be anything from automation to writing a script and preventing certain users from doing certain things. This could also be creating quick patches for whatever applications that you're using. Let's say if there is some kind of SQL injection vulnerability that was found in it, you may have to create a fix for that, and basically defending whatever applications that you're working on from all things hacking, malware, ransomware, insider threats, and any other cyber crimes out there. This is definitely an all-encompassing role, so if you're someone who is coming from a software development or software engineering background and you're trying to get into cybersecurity, this would probably be the best role for you because you already have your experience in coding and you can probably figure your way out around an application or writing a script in Python and trying to automate something, or even doing something that may be more DevOps focused. This is definitely one of the key roles in cybersecurity where coding is definitely a very big plus. Alright, so the next role is a cloud engineer. Now these roles are definitely up and coming just in the last 5 or 10 years when different public and hybrid clouds have become much more popular. So cloud engineers are basically IT professionals who design and implement different cloud-based systems for your company. Now if you're someone who is new to cybersecurity or just cloud in general, it's actually very time consuming to manage a whole cloud infrastructure just because of all the compliance things that you have to think about, especially if you're working in a sector that is highly regulated. For example, what kind of data can be stored in the cloud versus how is that data encrypted, how is it getting passed to the cloud, does your company feel secure storing their data within another company's cloud that is basically a third-party vendor, even if there's a contract involved. And if there is some kind of problem or issue with the cloud, how do you debug that problem and fix it and understand what the vulnerabilities are in the cloud infrastructure? So if you think about it in layman's terms, a cloud is basically someone else's computer in which you don't have to pay and worry as much about the infrastructure in terms of hardware, but you are paying this vendor to basically store and process your data. Now of course a lot of companies do have their own internal clouds, but depending on how big your company is and what their budget is for a cloud-based infrastructure. But the main pros of using a cloud-based infrastructure is just in terms of scalability. For example, if you're a company managing all your own infrastructure, it can take a lot of money and a lot of maintenance just to upkeep all of your servers and all of your data centers, as well as just having to change your hardware every few years just so it's not outdated or running slower, and keeping up with the pace and speed for modern technology. So usually it is a cheaper alternative to use something like AWS or Google Cloud just to do all of your processing, your data storage, and things like that. But of course, there are lots and lots of things to think about from a security standpoint, and not a lot of companies are just willing to pass over their data, even if it's encrypted and even if it's at a big tech company. You still want to do your due diligence and make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect you and your customers' data. So because of this, cloud engineers are very, very popular nowadays, especially if you're working for a company like Salesforce, which is cloud-based. But if you're looking for a role in cybersecurity that might be focused a bit more on newer technologies, I would definitely recommend looking into cloud engineering. And there's definitely a lot of certification programs out there for this as well, so you can definitely do some research on that. All right, so I've made a very, very long video, and I don't think many people want to sit through a video this long, but I did promise 25. I know I did, but basically I went through 20, and the last 5 I'm just gonna read out to you guys in case you want to do extra research on them. But the next 5 are systems engineers, security governance and risk analysts, being a cybersecurity professor or instructor. We love our teachers, a cybersecurity audit analyst, or a CISO/cybersecurity manager. So I've talked a lot in the last, I've actually been recording for an hour and a half, believe it or not, but thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Definitely let me know which role stood out to you the most and any that I've missed. I know there's definitely not the entire list of all cybersecurity jobs out there, but it's definitely a start for someone who might be looking and shopping around for different careers in cybersecurity. So definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments. All right, thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!